Hello, Dr. Flight here. In this segment, we are going to discuss different methods that are used in gathering problems that customers have with their products. Now, problem-based concept generation is one form of identifying new product concepts. Another form of identifying new product concepts is called attribute-based problem identification. And so that's something that we'll deal with in another segment. But today, in this segment, what we're going to look at specifically are different methods that we can use marketing research for in order to identify, uncover problems that customers have with their current products that they're using every day. We're going to begin to discuss problem-based concept generation methods, and to do so, we'll just simply review the table or the chart that we saw in a previous segment. And in particular, when we look at the problem-based concept generation process, we had four separate components of that process. The middle area that's highlighted in red indicates different methods that we could use in order to come up with new product ideas based on problems that customers have. As we know, there are many different internal and external sources of information as they relate to problems that the consumers may have with products. So we want to make sure that we review those, both internal and external sources. But ultimately, with whomever we speak to, we have a number of different methods that we can use in order to gather information. So these methods, as we look through them, include interviewing focus groups, observation studies, role-playing scenario analysis, wildcard experiments, and then also brainstorming sessions. So these types of activities and these types of methods are what we call qualitative research, in the sense that what we're doing is we're gathering what we call rich data, or data that is mostly verbal and very, very descriptive. Much of the data that we look at as we do this type of research is in words and is not communicated through numbers necessarily. It's not necessarily quantifiable in that sense. So again, these are research methods that we would typically use in a research process. And the sources of this information would be our end consumer, people within our firm internally who are close to the customer, experts, and so forth. So as we move forward, we want to think about how we'd go about interviewing and focus groups. Interviews are typically one-to-one. In-depth interviews can last anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour or so, and that information is gathered on a one-to-one basis. Focus groups are typically small groups of consumers who all have some shared interest or knowledge, or have some components that they have in common, so that we can talk as a small group. Typically 8 to 12 people would be involved in something like that. So the things that we want to ask in interviews and in focus groups would be what the real problem is. When they talk about their problem, they'll often talk about a symptom of a problem, but we want to actually dig deep in a conversation and have them describe what the real problems are in using a product, and the problems that, or the needs that they're having met by using a product. So the product is only a solution. In order to solve a problem, we need to make sure we fully understand what those problems are. We want to make sure we understand what their attitudes are and their beliefs are towards the products and products categories. So are they happy, sad? Are they passionate? Are they emotional? And things of that nature. So their emotional state or their behavior or attitude towards the product and product category. We want to understand what product attributes or characteristics they like and they don't like, what they'd like to see, what they'd rather not see, and so forth. So the components of the products themselves, their satisfaction with the products, how well products currently solve their problem, and then also needs that are left that are still unmet by them. And then we also want to get a feel um, for trends that are taking place that they see the product maybe evolving into, or their needs evolving into. And in particular, our lead users are good at being able to talk about what they'd like to see next. So so that trend in their lifestyle and changes that are taking place would be important for that. All right, so as a research process, again, focus groups and interviews are very, very common. It's not uncommon at all to hold these sessions with individuals. Another type of research method that we could use is something called observation, and this would also include role playing and protocol analysis and problem analysis as well. When we observe, what we generally want to do is simply watch how a consumer interacts with our product and make notes and try to ascertain and understand what they're doing as they interact with the product. We won't necessarily know what they're thinking because that's not something we can directly observe, but we can certainly observe behavior. And sometimes this is really beneficial because when we watch behavior, we're actually seeing some revealed action or revealed result of a person's decision. So behavior is what we actually want people to do, and so observing it is a good way to begin to understand what problems they might have with their current solutions and products they use. So here are some examples of some observation studies. Car makers have been known to go out to parking lots and watch consumers as they interact with their cars. So, for instance, a while back there was a study done where people were observed coming in and out of a grocery store, and it was noted that when you're carrying grocery bags, it's very difficult to negotiate a key and unlock a trunk or a door. And so this was one of the starts for keyless entry, or the motivation for keyless entry was the observation that holding things in your hand and negotiating again a keyhole and a traditional key, it's very difficult. So in order to solve that problem, keyless entry was an innovation that was created. Honda has grown through insights in how they view their car sizes and SUVs in particular. In the United States, looking at families and how large the size of the vehicle should be when you've got several kids and family members climbing in and out of the SUV. And this includes the height of the vehicle, the number of doors, cup holders, and then also nowadays the audio-visual interactions that families have in the vehicle are all observable types of things. And here's a third example with Bausch and Lomb, where they observed individuals as the individuals were performing skits or role-playing activities. When one person was called upon to be an eyeball and the other person was called upon to be a contact lens. Now this is kind of a silly example, but when you have two people, one portraying an eyeball and the other portraying a contact lens, and they're trying to interact with each other, you can begin to appreciate the challenge of putting a contact lens in an eye and how difficult that might be. So while far-fetched and a little out there conceptually, the point is that by constructing observational opportunities, we can learn how customers interact with our product in a real way, and we can make a lot of judgments and perceptions from being able to do that. So another extension of this type of role play is something called scenario analysis. When we talk about scenarios, what we're talking about is describing a situation and trying to place a particular consumer into that situation. So we may ask individuals to complete sentences like what if sentences, what if we were in this situation, what would you do? We might ask people to describe how they would react if they were put into a condition, if they had a certain scenario that they found themselves in, how they would feel, what they would do, and so forth. So scenario analysis is an important tool that we can use to try to project what the future may hold moving forward. One key important element to think about when we talk about scenarios is something called extending or leaping. Most of the time when we create products, they're extensions or minor changes to something that already exists. So for instance, I may have a particular product and I add a couple new features to it. So the product changes, I create a new product, but those changes don't amount to a huge leap into a whole new product category, but rather it just extends what I currently have and provides a little bit more benefit to the customer. And we sort of creep along with products that way. The alternative is this leaping notion where we move from like time A today to 10 years from now, and we try to project how a big change, a radical innovation might occur and completely change how we do business or how we do life in general. So like an example of this is a product like the ATM, the automatic teller machine. Back in the late 1980s, when ATMs started to emerge as a technology, they completely revolutionized how people interacted with banks, and that social interaction and the use of a teller and waiting in lines, and really the entire design of the interior of banks has changed significantly. They used to be very imposing, very structured, very secure, of course, and things like that. Now, most people do banking outside of the bank as opposed to inside the bank. And so that ATM concept really was a huge leap forward in how people use financial instruments and how they bank and so forth. The internet, of course, is a very leaping type of a technology, which has created vast jumps in how in product innovation, which solve problems and talking about how we do things nowadays. So the extending versus leaping concept is really a big one to kind of grasp on and think about. So we want to be able to use these leaping and extending concepts to identify trends that are moving on or moving us in certain directions. And if we can leapfrog a generation of product innovation, then that would move us towards the leaping concept and bring our product and our innovation much faster along. A number of techniques exist to be able to do this. So following, again, our lead users, those would be trend people, identifying hot technologies, technological transfers or changeovers that will allow us to make a big leap is a big type of an emphasis, as well as we look to do scenarios and again place our consumers into a situation that they might not normally be set into. An extension of scenario analysis includes wildcard events as well. So a wildcard event is a precautionary practice where we might be doing our business, running our company, and what we might say is, look, what if some unforeseen catastrophic event happened? How would we react? How would we contain that? How would we continue to do business? It could be a positive thing or it could be a negative thing, but the point is, how would we perform our business if a very low probability event happened. And so these could create opportunities for solving customers' problems as well if we can foresee such things as happening. There are some examples such as like a no carbon policy. If we fast forwarded 10, 15 years and we were living in a world where carbon emissions were not allowed, what would we do to solve people's problems in that scenario? Again, it's a wild card event. It's an event that's not likely to happen, or it may happen, but the probability isn't very high necessarily right now. So what would we do to solve people's problems in that event? Could we do it? Other random acts, like altruism breakouts, or something where people behave socially very different or in an unexpected way. That could be something that happens. What if, here's an example of if cold fusion, or if a technology emerged that allowed for the users of the technology to have essentially free and continuous energy. What would happen in that situation? How would that change the products that we offer? How would that change the way people use the products that we currently serve? And what can we build into our new products that would help there? Okay, so these are, again, scenario analysis, wildcard events. These are all types of projective activities that we can talk to our consumers about, and we can do this in focus groups, so we can do this on individual one-to-one basis and so forth. Again, these are different methods we're using in order to collect ideas for products that solve people's problems. So we really want to focus on asking the questions that deal with what they currently like, what they don't like, how their problems are being solved, and so forth in our product category. The last area that we'll talk about deals with group activities or brainstorming in groups. So the idea of group creativity is this notion that as a group we should be able to come up with better ideas than individuals could on their own. And this whole concept is partially true, partially not true. A lot of times the evidence and research suggests that individuals can come up with great ideas on their own. A couple challenges with this is that ideas that are brought up by individuals aren't necessarily validated by others. So in other words, I may think I have a good idea, but I really need other people to tell me that it's a good idea before I can move forward. Another issue is that I may have part of a good idea, but I might not have all of a good idea. And so if I talk to others about what I'm thinking, they can add to it. And so that they can create, we can create together, we can co-create a great idea using their input in areas that I don't see or I don't really think about. So creativity is a mixed bag. There again, some research suggests that that group activities are beneficial. In 1938, Alex Osborne, in fact, kind of created the concept of brainstorming. So where one person presents a thought and then another person reacts to it, then another person reacts to that, and so on and so forth. And in a sequence of events, the group comes up with some group thought that sort of makes sense. So moving forward, we have this idea that that brainstorming allows us to let others think about and judge our idea, and that the more we talk about our idea, the more the idea develops and becomes built upon as multiple perspectives come into play. Generally speaking, when we talk about brainstorming, we're going to have groups of individuals. And in Osborne's original work, he identified 12 people in a group. And the general rules for brainstorming is that people should be free to come up with ideas where those ideas are generally written down so others can look at them. Generally not criticized, and so people feel freer and open to talk more about their ideas. We want to be able to combine ideas together so that they're able to, form one good idea. Um, we don't, again, we want to avoid having an idea shot down, um, and um, and so that everybody's idea is free. Sometimes that's called the bazooka effect, when that is, when people's ideas are stifled because there's a dominant personality perhaps in the room or something along those lines. And there are creative ways that brainstorming sessions can take place. So brain sketching is a process where individuals draw a picture of what they're thinking. Rather than in words, they're expressing themselves in visuals and illustrations. Another technique is the speed storming technique, where individuals are paired together and they throw an idea out at each other, and then after a minute or two they all rotate around. So they find a new partner, and again a new pair. They brainstorm each other's ideas together, and then they rotate again around. So creativity can be built into the brainstorming sessions, for sure, and variations and adaptations of brainstorming happens as well. The Phillips 66 method actually involves, instead of 12-person groups, so a large group of 12 or more in a brainstorming session, actually having sessions of only 6 members, and then having those 6 members brainstorm with each other in separate groups, and then rotate groups. So it's kind of like the speed brainstorming concept, only with groups of 6. They meet for six minutes each, and then they rotate around, and the groups shuffle so that the ideas are spread, and more creativity actually takes place. We've got brainstorming circles, which is another technique or interesting form of brainstorming, where you have a circle and somebody starts with an idea, and then the person next to them has to add to the idea, and then the person next to that takes the idea again and adds to that, and so as the idea circles around, it gets built upon at each stage. We have reverse brainstorming as well. We have the teardown method as well, and then finally the Delphi method. So in reverse brainstorming, what we do is we take a product's weaknesses or problems, and we try to focus on those rather than the solutions or the improvements necessarily made to the product. We focus on kind of what's wrong. So the negativity, or what's wrong with the product, why is it failing? And from that, we are able to identify weaknesses, and then from the weaknesses, maybe come up with the problem, the solving aspect of the problem as well. The teardown method is again, it's one where we actually reverse the approach, where instead of avoiding criticism of ideas, we take an idea, we throw it out there, and then we try to poke holes in it. And the ideas that really survive that process of criticism are the good ones. So in the teardown method, somebody throws out an idea, and instead of accepting all good ideas, what we do is we try to find fault in an idea, and then those that work or stay the longest are the best. The final method we'll mention here is the Delphi method. Delphi method is fairly common commonly reported, where what we do is we talk to experts in the field of our product. So those might be experts in industry. They might be people who write about and know about, do a lot of research on the products that are focused on in our product class. And we ask them what they see as beneficial new aspects of the product, product problem solving, and where they see the product moving forward. So the Delphi, they're like the oracles. They're the ones who see the future, and we want to tap into their knowledge and know-how and expertise, and have them provide us information on how we can develop new products. This leads us up to electronic brainstorming. So there are two more areas here when we think about brainstorming or techniques or concepts. Electronic brainstorming, and then also brainstorming or product communities. And this could be an electronic community as well. The idea of electronic brainstorming is simply that we want to, again, incorporate a large number of people who can foster ideas, grow ideas, create ideas, use idea generation processes, but not restrict them to be in one geographic location, and take advantage of digital technologies that we typically have. So that nowadays, so these types of activities, we need some type of software that'll allow us to communicate, will also allow us to store information and be able to use this information in a timely manner. Using electronic brainstorming allows everybody to participate. It also frees people up from a time perspective. So you get a lot more information that you otherwise normally would. In fact, you're going to have a lot more comments made and a lot more information to process than you would in a room where you're just manually writing down the concepts that are being thrown out. Early versions of electronic brainstorming happened at a single site with networked terminals. Nowadays, that's less important because we have internet capabilities, and we can meet remotely very easily, and we can communicate very easily, especially through social networking. Again, in early days, networked terminals were a thing that was done. Different ideas would be typed in, they'd be projected on the screen and then recorded. Now we use multiple sites via computer link up, so the internet would certainly be something that we would use nowadays. And as just a matter of course, in terms of what we're dealing with here, we could certainly handle larger group sizes because of the nature of the electronic and distance meeting that we're actually doing in electronic brainstorming. This brings us up to this notion of online communities. So again, electronic or online communities is something that we are using specifically to, from a brand perspective, and as a marketing or business concept. There is this notion that we want to actively motivate and create and reward groups of consumers who get together as a community, and their main thing they have in common is the brand that they choose to use. So if my brand has a group of loyal consumers, and I can get them together to talk with each other, to share their interests with each other, then that's a brand community. It's a community of individuals who have this one thing in common. They use my product, and they're willing to talk about it, and they have shared interests and so forth. So online communities act in a very similar way, in the sense that we have groups of people who want to share information with each other. They want to network to each other. And, with, again, social media opportunities nowadays, this is very much a concept that is in play. And as a researcher, we can certainly tap into these communities and at least view the conversations, if not interact with the conversations that are taking place within the community. So we have open online communities that we can observe. We have communities of individuals who are, again, lead users. We have firm organized communities. So I may have a website, and on my website I might have a group that people, like a blog, and then people can chime in on the blog, and we can talk about products and innovation and changes, and it's something that I'm generating myself, and I'm organizing as a researcher who represents a company. That's something I can certainly do. Private online communities could be set up as well. And then proprietary online communities exist finally as well. So a number of different opportunities to develop a community and to tap into and manage a community. Some warrant some control. So proprietary and private online communities might be ones where we look at, and for firm organized communities are ones that we look at for sure, or we want to interact directly with the members of the community and our customers. Open online communities are ones where we might just want to observe from a distance and not necessarily be perceived as controlling the content of the community itself. So uses of online communities, the VOC, the voice of the customer, as we've mentioned before, is a super important concept, and this allows us to be able to tap into what the customer wants and wishes and so forth. So the VOC, being able to monitor communities, blogs, and be able to actually record and measure what they're talking about helps us design products and understand what they like and what they don't like about the product. Online communities also help us develop loyalty. Satisfaction goes up when people engage in an online community. So establishing the rapport and developing a line of communication that's bilateral, that goes between us and them, is something that happens here as well. And then finally, emotional bonds, developing those with the customers as well. So in short, online communities are an extension of kind of this electronic groupthink concept that electronic brainstorming and then traditional brainstorming would also use. These are challenging, though. I mean, it's not like this is easy work necessarily. When we're developing communities, it's like developing brand equity. You have to go through a lot of positioning exercises. You have to go out and gather the individuals, create the forum for them to talk, be able to monitor and kind of organize their thinking and direct their thinking in a productive way. So we have to decide what the role of the firm's going to be, like how we will actually interact with them. With the community and with the group think, and how much we'll control it versus how much we're going to let it go for a free for all and let people talk as they will. Like any type of research, this is going to take time, and there's going to be an expense or a cost involved with it. So this is something that we need to be able to take into account. Developing relationships with people in this sense takes time. So there's this idea of community maturity. So like people who are new to the community versus people who have been in the community for a long time, and you're thinking about each perspective as they provide insight and as they provide information for us, may be dampened somewhat with or moderated to some degree with how long they've been in the community itself. Okay, so organizing content, being able to monitor the content, being able to record the threads and make sense of this is important. And all of this is important when you're dealing with qualitative research. So this is not just germane to online communities or brainstorming or whatnot. When you're dealing with qualitative data, you're dealing with words and sentences. And so you do have to figure out a way, and there are techniques that you can use to organize that information, and that's something that will need to be considered if you use a problem-based ideation or a problem-based method for gathering new product concepts. All right, so we talked about problems focused idea generation methods. So, if we're going to generate new product ideas, focus on like the customer and what they like and don't like about the product, and use a method or use a technique that makes sense. That adds value, that's something that you can do. So interviewing and focus groups are kind of there. We talked about observation, role-playing, scenario analysis, wildcard experiments, and also brainstorming techniques. So there's a lot of different methods that can be used. This is what we do as we're thinking about generating product ideas using problem-based methodologies.